Hey, everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
What's happening, man?
Dude, game changer right now. For those who are listening but not watching.
You have no idea what we're talking about.
We got some new chairs.
Go to YouTube and subscribe and watch.
Yeah.
Please.
Rate, review, like, subscribe, whatever. It's kind of a game changer right now. This is awfully comfortable.
I'm loving it. It's great.
So if we sound super chill,
chiller than usual,
you'll know it's because we actually have comfortable chairs after 4 years of doing the show.
On a folding chair.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You're
going to miss that one. I can really tell. But anyways.
What are we talking about, man?
Today,
I'm excited.
Yeah, good. Me too.
Yeah?
Me too. We are coming to the final chapter, I think, in some of this crazy near death, about death, after death, before death, kind of everything in between, paranormal, mediumship, all this stuff. We are closing things out here with something called Intermission Memories.
Don't know what that is.
I
really don't know what that is.
Yeah, I had heard about this type of a thing before a couple of years ago, just by way of different podcasts and stuff that I listened to. But it's one of those where it's like there isn't a ton out there about it. There's a lot of kind of anecdotal stories. And actually, when I say a lot, I should say there are very few. But there are stories out there.
Sure.
And also, there has been some real research into this stuff. And for those who are hearing about this today in terms of kind of like their first introduction to all of these various surviving death topics that I've been covering over on our Patreon feed, it's the premium feed, the last, 3-4 episodes?
Yeah.
I've covered all this crazy stuff, near-death experiences, end-of-life experiences, mediumship.
Here's the thing. I know what you're thinking if I say they're amazing and they're worth it. You're like, yes, Tim, of course you would say that. And you're probably not wrong. And also, it is so worth it. They are just, honestly, I think some of the best shows we've ever done.
Sure.
Some of the best podcasts I have listened to is just the accounts that you've mentioned. I mean, it has, quite honestly, completely changed the way I think about things.
That's cool.
It is. And it's scary and frightening, but also reassuring. But also, it's like when you're confronted with facts that don't conform to the way you thought things worked, you have to start rearranging how things work inside your brain. And I have done that. And it's like, okay, I guess we're here now. That's been a wild ride, man.
Yeah. And even for me, somebody who's just always had an interest in this stuff and done my own research, but really just kind of more enjoyed absorbing this stuff through other shows and different types of books and stuff. Even getting back into this and reading the book Surviving Death by Leslie Kean. Also, for today's show, I'm bringing in some other research and some different sources, but it's all related to the same stuff. And it is just like, okay.
Right. And also, so just to tie that off real quick, so you can find those over on our Patreon feed, which you can get to at www.patreon.com/crackpot podcast, $3 a month. Check them out. If you don't like it, it's $3. If you do like it, we have hundreds of other shows over there and it's worth it. And it's a great community and there's all sorts of other stuff that comes with it. I will stop talking about that. You know what to do. If you like it, check it out. But you still didn't answer my question. What does intermission?
Yes.
I don't even know what we're talking. Intermission memories. What is that?
So what it is, it is the memories that people have, specifically children, when they're real young, of an existence after death, but before rebirth.
Whoa. There's a lot to unpack here. So you are saying young children. It's not just a past life. It's after the past life, but before the present life.
Yes, and in fact,
what? Yeah. This has gone off the rails. Is that a thing?
It's a real thing. It's a very real thing. And in fact, what Leslie Kean draws out, some of the research that she goes to, is actually some of the same stuff that I brought up back in like season 2. And this is Dr. Stevenson, Dr. Tucker, both from the University of Virginia School of Medicine, who've done a lot of research around reincarnation, past lives, all this stuff. And they've settled on this phenomenon, we'll call it intermission memories, which is, you've got a 3-year-old talking about, well, okay, well, when I was up in heaven, or when I was looking down and seeing people, or when I chose my birth mom, or previously before I died, when I was doing XYZ, and then I went to this other place for a while and then decided to come back. It's all that weird stuff.
That is so wild.
It is.
That presupposes like 100 things I'd never thought about before we started doing this.
I know. And actually, for this to be true, like the only way this works, by the way, is if you actually have reincarnation.
Yes.
Because otherwise, nobody would come back to be able to talk about this stuff. So it's like you have to accept reincarnation for this really to actually work out.
Okay. I think in typical crackpot fashion, I have to ask you, what's your believability of this? Or you have to ask that of me? I mean, I don't know. Someone has to ask someone something.
Dude. I feel like at this point, I'm just going to say I believe everything and anything and everything. There we go. That's what it is. Because it's like...
Good, why not?
I'm starting to think that because you can't like untangle a lot of this stuff. It's all just layers upon layers, interwoven.
But to me, there's a difference between believing that, like some of those anecdotes you were talking about, like when someone dies on an operating table, and they come back to life, and they're like, "Oh, I saw the guy with the red shirt come in, and someone dropped a piece of paper under the bed." And it's like, you would literally have no way of knowing about that unless you were looking in the room, but you were unconscious and quite honestly medically dead at that point. So that's like, okay, but how else would they know? And so I can be like, all right, something's going on, I'm there.
Right.
And then you start talking about like past lives. And it's like, oh, gosh, I mean, some of those stories you told us, like, there is literally no other way for them to know these facts, and they are verifiable facts. And it's like no one's trying to lie about any of this. And it's like, okay, all right. So there's reincarnation, I guess, right?
Right.
But now I guess if you draw the logical conclusion, maybe reincarnation isn't instantaneous. Which also implies that there's time in the afterlife, right?
Yes.
What's up with that?
I don't know.
Time's supposed to be relative. And what? I mean...
Yeah. So what I would say is for today, what's important to understand, everything that I'm referring to in these like different stories, these are things that have kind of risen to the top in terms of like things that could actually be verified by like researchers.
Sure.
So this isn't just, Billy down the street like, oh yeah, I remember that. And
this isn't off an internet forum somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So these are coming from actual researchers, and that's why it's all the more confusing in some ways, but then also I would say it does add a little bit of credibility to it. And so I think at this point, just accept it. Maybe.
I'm okay. I am still skeptical. I know what's coming, even though I have no idea what's coming. But I'm just gonna say at this moment, I am very skeptical of this.
I think that's totally fair. So maybe just to kick this off, then let's talk about maybe how this works. So as I've said, hey, look, first of all, you got to believe in reincarnation for this to make any sense. And then on top of that, you have to think about, well, how do you even like categorize what happens after death and then rebirth? So let me, I'm going to pull a few sentences here from Leslie Kean's book, Surviving Death, and give me just a sec here to pull it open. Okay, so pulling directly from the book here, just to kind of set the stage. Research have found that sometimes children with past life memories also describe the existence between lives, between the death of the previous person and their birth in this current life. In cases studied by Stevenson, Tucker and others, small children spontaneously make reference to their pre-birth state, as if it were natural and simply part of a continuum that is in their memories. Also, according to Dr. Tucker, about 1 in 5 children that have past life memories also have intermission memories. So,
but past life memories is not common.
Right. So you're already talking about a small percentage of people.
So then 20% of those tend to have these intermission memories.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's an even smaller number that they can truly validate some of those experiences, right?
Okay,
so
sure.
keep that in mind. So we're talking about a really nuanced thing here, and this is something that, within the book, there isn't a lot, talking about it. And so I've pulled in both, Leslie Kean's book, but also these other sources, but they're all building off some of the same research done by Dr. Tucker, done by Dr. Stevenson. And just to break apart how we even talk about this stuff, or even put it within a framework, Dr. Tucker has categorized 3 main stages to intermission memories. There's a transitional phase, and this is right after death. There's a stable stage for most of the time between lives.
Yeah.
And then there's a return stage, which involves the events close to the time of birth.
Okay.
So 3 main stages, right?
Okay.
Right after death, something in between, and then basically pre-birth. Now, what I also found, and I don't want to confuse folks, but I'll just lay it out there, this other source that I'm bringing in too actually kind of breaks apart those stages and gets into a little bit finer detail. So they talk about kind of 5 stages, but they're all the same thing. It's just more of an umbrella statement of 3 main stages. So let's talk about how this works.
Please.
Okay. All right. So stage 1, the immediate death and discarnate existence. This often involves memories of the funeral and the unstable days following the death, when subjects remain associated with their life and grieving relatives. And this is where it's a little shaky and difficult to verify, but studies have been done, and here's a few examples of this, right? There was a Sri Lankan girl named Disna. She recalled witnessing her funeral and said that she'd been buried near an anthill, which ended up being true, by the way, but she didn't know about that at all before her death, and when she pointed to the direction or to the area where her grave was, it didn't have a marker, but according to villagers, that's where her previous life had been buried.
Yeah.
A Thai subject named Pratmaran recalled that her infant body was buried outside the village cemetery rather than within it, as it should have been. No one except for the undertaker knew that this had happened, but he admitted it when asked. So this immediate, time after death, stories that come back are, I saw so-and-so at the funeral. I saw there was a lot of, for example, red or blue, or very specific facts that they can call out that they can go back to those families and say, what was the funeral like? What were the pictures like? Show us pictures and how did it look? And they can verify some of this stuff.
What's fascinating about those 2 examples you gave, Sri Lanka and Thailand, both of them heavily Buddhist countries.
Yes.
Which believe, very commonly, society commonly believes in reincarnation, not like a Western society that we're used to. So that's fascinating. I'm not drawing any conclusions from that in this moment, but I find that fascinating.
I'm 100% with you. And this is where I'll call it out now. I was going to mention it later. The fact that the terminology used by people that they're studying all over the world, folks that they're studying are using cultural specific terms to what they grew up around.
Sure.
However, exactly, right? However, they apply, the same foundational concepts apply. So, for example, heaven Like you might hear the term heaven. As I refer to this, don't think of it as literal, like biblical heaven, right?
Sure, harps and clouds and pearly gates and that sort of thing.
Correct. So it'll be like, somebody from a different culture would refer to something else, right? But
sure.
Or I might just use the term heaven, but they don't always literally mean like, okay, yeah, I talked to God in heaven, right? So I want to call that out quickly too. But you're right, and they did find, of course, a higher incidence of past life memories, reincarnation stories in cultures that actually do have that as part of their foundational beliefs. So, you have, first of all, some of these initial memories from the immediate death and the days after that. And then where it gets, to me, kind of uncomfortable is this concept of a discarnate existence. And this is essentially like a spirit wandering the earth after death.
Sure.
So going back to some of the examples here from Asia, a woman named Purnima from Sri Lanka had recalled being struck by a large vehicle when she was riding her bicycle. And after the incident, she floated in semi-darkness for a few days. She saw people mourning for her and crying and watched her body until her funeral. Then she saw a light, and the next thing she knew, she was in her present life. Purnima did not recall anything else of the discarnate existence after her funeral, right? So she just remembers like floating around.
Like she was just hadn't gone beyond yet. She just hung around.
Yes. And this next one is really pretty heavy. There's an Indian boy named Veer Singh. He said that during an 11-year intermission, he resided in a peepal tree in the yard of his former family's house. He knew that the family had purchased a camel, had been engaged in several lawsuits, and he stated the names of 2 children born after his death.
Come on.
So he's able to
And then of course the researchers tracked down the family, verified these facts as well as they could.
Yes. And
wow.
During this kind of discarnate existence, he said he remembers he got annoyed when he saw 2 women swinging from a branch of his tree that caused the plank on which they were seated to break.
He caused the swing to break?
No, like them sitting on it.
Okay.
He also said that he had left his tree to follow family members of the family who went out alone, which accorded with a dream his previous mother had had, in which her deceased son appeared and informed her that he was accompanying another son when he went out at night.
Wow. That is so weird. So literally, just to restate everything you said, there was a kid born somewhere that was like, oh yeah, in my previous life, I died, and then I hung around a tree in a yard for 11 years, and they bought a camel and had a couple more kids, and there was a swing, and da-da-da-da-da. And the parents are like, interesting. Talk to some people who were able to verify this. And that kid, assumably quite young based on other research, would have no way of knowing this. Now, that is all absolutely wild. I have no explanation. I'm just going to pivot hard. Is 11 years common? That seems like a long time for a spirit to hang out, especially in a tree.
Dude, I could not. This was frustrating for me, and I would say I could not get a singular number for any of these stories.
Okay. It's just all over the board. It's such a small number that it's not enough data.
Right. That's exactly right. And the thing is also, you hear varying accounts of like the woman that had been hit by a car, or I think it was actually technically a bus, and she's like, well, I remember floating, and then all of a sudden I was reborn again, which implies it was pretty quick. I had heard somewhere too, and I think I mentioned this in one of the previous shows, that like I'd heard something about like 42 years was kind of like...
Oh, fascinating.
A common occurrence, but I couldn't find it anywhere here, so I didn't want to focus
just be
on that.
Anecdotal. Did the Tibetan Book of the Dead come up at all in the research? Because I don't know enough about it to speak at all coherently or intelligently, but I seem to remember there being It talks about the different stages of death, and it talks about the different stages of reincarnation.
Yes.
Do they line up with the research?
So I haven't studied the book.
Okay.
Like the stages of death. The Tibetan...
the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Yeah, it has a couple other names as well, but yeah.
That wasn't specifically called out in anything that I said, but I wonder if there are. I mean, that would be an interesting
listeners.
Study.
Hey, this is your chance. I have the book. I don't have time to go back and read it again, but I would love to know what the Buddhist theology says about that.
Seriously, I mean, that's where it's like. Oh, okay. And surely we're probably not the first people to think of that, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah. But it would be
thousands of years, literally.
Yeah, super interesting to actually try to tie this together, I think. Getting back to Leslie Kean's book, too, she pulled up an example that was just, like, mind-blowing, of course. And I'll say the facts are a little bit confusing, so I'll try to kind of jump into it and try to simplify it. But... Dr. Tucker had studied a boy named Patrick who gave specifics about a half-brother of his who died 12 years before Patrick was born. So he had a half-brother who died, whom he didn't know existed, had no idea.
Didn't cross paths.
Came from a different father, yep. So a couple of things here. Strangely, Patrick limped like his brother, which could not be medically explained. He had 3 birthmarks that corresponded to the marks on his brother's body. And Patrick reported that he had met a relative in heaven who went by the name Billy the Pirate. He said Billy had been shot by his stepfather in the mountains. He had brown eyes and brown hair, and that Billy was upset no one talked about him after his death. I'm going to cut to the story here from the book. Dr. Tucker explained that the details Patrick gave were correct. Billy had been killed by his stepfather 3 years before Lisa, Patrick's mother, was born. The murder was never talked about in the family. When Lisa asked about the nickname Billy the Pirate, the mother laughed. His wildness had led to the nickname, and Lisa's mother said she had not heard it since Billy's death. There seemed to be no way that Patrick could have ever heard about Billy or his nickname before.
That's so weird. I mean, I can write off the birthmarks and the limp as just being some sort of genetic fluke. You know, weird things happen when cells are dividing in a womb. I mean, who knows? But the memory of someone he had absolutely no way of knowing, including a nickname that no one ever mentioned.
Right.
That's bizarre, man.
As
that's
well as the
weird
facts of the death, the murder.
Jesus. That's just... What is that?
What is that is exactly right. Okay, so we've talked about kind of that immediate phase, that kind of high-level stage 1.
Yeah.
Next is kind of this, what's called the stable stage. But what's weird is there's not really a clear cutoff. Like, it seems a little bit more fluid, and obviously for scientific research purposes, there's not an easy way to put boundaries around this stuff. However, depending on how you slice it, this includes or can include some level of interaction between the living and the dead. So basically, this is the time after the person has died. They're probably a spirit that's aware they're no longer part of this earth. And they may be in heaven and sometimes in earth or somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's a stable stage in which they're not dying and they're not also being reborn. It's kind of truly everything else in the middle. And this is some more weird stuff. So kind of getting back to how I started this, it seems like this can actually include quite a bit of interaction between the living and the dead. So here we go. Maybe this proves ghost hunters and mediums correct. I don't know.
Maybe.
That's where my head goes.
We could bring in Bigfoot hunters, and I'm kind of like, maybe.
There was an Indian girl, and so by the way, these are all people that Dr. Tucker and Stevenson have studied. An Indian girl, Pratima, she said that she went up after she died, but whenever her previous son needed her, she came down to help him. A Dutch girl told her mother, I was with the angels in the sky and I looked down upon the earth. I flew to the earth, walked into a house, and looked around.
just
cool, right?
just doing what you do.
Similar to the previous example with Veer Singh, in which he had mentioned like he had come through in their dreams, like I shouldn't say a lot, but people that have reported this say they are able to communicate to the living during dreams. And I found that very interesting, and also
that is so fascinating, because that is when people say that they get messages, or I saw my grandpa in a dream, or I saw my loved one in a dream and they looked happy, and it makes them feel better, or they came and they told me a message or something like that. And it's so easy to just write it off as being the subconscious working through some sort of whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. Now you're saying that there are people with intermission memories that say, oh yeah,
that was me.
Go down, appear in a dream, hang out in a tree, do what I need to do.
One of the more bizarre anecdotes also was from a famous Italian case, and I'm going to spin this off into a whole other show later.
Sure.
I'd never heard of this. Alexandrina Simona, she had appeared in her mother's dreams. Her family heard knocks on the wall, and she communicated with them through a medium. So apparently, even in some cases, like poltergeist-like activities,
totally
could just as easily be explained by this.
Totally.
So perhaps, all of this paranormal activity could be described by this. But also, it's not just the appearing in a dream. It's not just the rapping on a wall. It's also apparitions, folks.
Oh, no, really?
Yes. So a Burmese boy named Yin Mong recalled that after his death, when his plane crashed, he had wandered about as a spirit, approaching his brother's home just as someone emerged from the bathroom. He recognized his sister-in-law and walked towards her, stopping when he felt he could get no closer. She saw him and told him that if he wished, he could stay. Later that night, he visited her in her sleep. His mother and sister also appeared in the dream, asking him to return with them, but he declined to go with them. Now, of course, the sister-in-law, the mother, had validated that an apparition was seen, that he had appeared in the dreams, like backing the story up. So it's just
to once again state the obvious in different words. You have people, children generally, who are recounting, well, not past lives, but they're like, oh, yes, and then I was a ghost. And then I went and I saw my mom. And I did this other stuff. And then they track down the family, and they're like, oh, yeah, we saw the ghost.
Yeah.
He showed up in the hallway. We talked to it. Oh, yeah, those are the words. Like, how do you... I should stop trying to make this conform with Western thought, because clearly something else is going on that can't be explained with quote-unquote science.
Right.
Because these are facts. These are verifiable anecdotes at best that people would have no other way of knowing.
Exactly. So it's
like, what is going on?
A couple other things too that I found interesting about the stable stage, because there aren't like necessarily clear trends, or there are things that you can say are similar, but also everybody appears to have somewhat of a unique experience. There is a Turkish boy named Nasir. He said that upon his death, he gave God an account of his conduct. So he was like having a conversation with God, and a God not like, how we think of biblical God, but like some higher power. A boy named Kazuya from Japan said that after he died by suicide, he spent some time in a reflection room before deciding to be reborn to his former mother.
Whoa.
Chennai.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh.
Chennai, a Burmese boy, said that he'd been forced to remove his clothes and walk naked through a tangled lotus pond, but no other subjects were subjected to judgment or punishment. So that was the only one that I've heard that's been like, ooh, I had to do something to...
Well, the reflection room is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's punishment with a capital P necessarily, but it's certainly some sort of for lack of better terms, karmic retribution.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's like, yeah, reflect on what you did.
Right.
And then make a decision afterwards.
Right.
Wild. That is just, I have no words.
Well, so in getting back to that Kazuya, he said that he made a pre-birth compact with 3 other spirits to be reborn around the same time.
Oh my God.
Like what?
They're like, hey, let's do this together.
Yeah.
You ready? 1, 2, 3, jump.
Yeah, basically.
What?
So you hear about these different accounts and different things that these spirits go through. Also, some trends that have been observed around the world seem to be, we can kind of put it into a framework like this. There seem to be different like spirit guides throughout these different stages.
Okay.
And so, for instance, during the immediate death, right, that's stage 1, there's essentially what's called as a gatekeeper, escort, or guide. And so they kind of help you go to the next stage. In that stage, there's an entity in charge, which is like a godlike figure. And apparently there seem to be entities within this discarnate kind of stage 2 existence to stable stage, which help you and or together make the decisions about what's going to happen next, whether you get reborn or spend more time doing something else. It's not like always just your decision is kind of what I'm getting at. So it's like there seem to be these figures that are consistent globally that follow these different stages of death. These types of
that don't
spirits.
necessarily conform with any sort of organized religion.
That's right. That's right.
That is so fascinating. And of course, we wouldn't hear about people who choose not to be reborn because their stories wouldn't be told.
Exactly.
But I suppose if they have a choice, that would be a choice, is to just hang out in the spirit realm.
Yeah. The lounge,
For
the green room, the spirit green room,
the VIP lounge for the rest of eternity. Wow, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that brings us to, so you get out of the stable stage and you get back to now the return stage. This is stage 3 where basically you're coming back.
Yep.
Interestingly, between 40 and 50% of the people that were studied have memories from the return stage.
So it's more common.
It's more common.
I suppose because it's closer to birth.
Yeah, right. That's all I could think of, too.
Maybe, I guess, if things work that way.
Like it was yesterday, right?
Like it was just before I was born.
So in Japan, there was a boy named Katsuguro. He told his family that after he died of smallpox, he had stayed in his previous house until an old man had come to take him away. That man had led him to his present house and told him that was where he would be reborn.
Wow.
Keys, a Dutch boy, said that after he died, he had been met by an angel who had taken him to God. He stayed with God for a while. Then angels had urged him to reincarnate. When he resisted, they assured him that they would stand by him. Like, okay.
What?
A boy named Ryan Hammonds recounted that after his death, he had gone first to a waiting place on the way to heaven. He said that he had seen his parents from heaven, and he picked his mother, whom he had known in an earlier life. He wanted to know... feel free to...
Just keep going.
Okay.
Just keep going.
I don't have answers, so yeah. He wanted to know why his mother had wanted him to be a girl. When she asked why he thought that, he explained that he had seen it from heaven. A doctor had done a test and told her she was carrying a boy, which was so upsetting to her that she had cried for a long time during his father's birthday dinner in a restaurant. Her reaction that night was something Ryan's mother had soon regretted and did not talk about, but his account was entirely accurate.
Oh my God. Just stop. Just stop right here. There is so much to unpack right there. So Ryan, after he died, chose his birth mother because he knew that soul?
Yeah.
For lack of a better word?
Yes.
Knew that soul from a previous life.
Uh-huh.
And was like, yeah, she's cool. I'd like her as my mom.
Uh-huh.
And then not only has that wild story to tell, but then tells her very specifically a memory of when she found out that he was a boy and cried in a restaurant, which she never spoke of again because she was so ashamed of doing it.
On his father's birthday.
Yes. You can't make that look. I have a kid. You have kids. Mm-hmm. Kids tell stories, man.
Yeah.
Kids tell wild stories, but not like that. Not.
Yeah.
That is so. Can you explain that to me, please?
Okay, so here's how it works. Let's keep going with another one here.
Let's keep going with another one. Oh, come on, man.
A Burmese girl named Mapar recalled being a British officer aboard a reconnaissance plane that ran out of fuel and crashed in Burma during World War II. She thought of England and found herself there, but the King of Death forced her back to Burma. Later, she went to England a second time, but again was pulled back to Burma and told she would have to be reborn there. Huh. Although the choice of her family was left to her.
You're stuck in Burma, but we'll let you pick your parents.
Yeah. Now, this last one here from these like choosing your birth family stuff is really, really weird.
That is, that is so interesting, man. That is so interesting. I have nothing but superlatives. I don't have any substance to add to this.
I totally get it. Let me give you one more here too from this phase here. So there was a boy. He was 4 years old. His name's Bobby Hodges, and he recalled fragments, I guess, of 2 previous lives and had clear memories of events beginning with his time in an aunt's womb. So this story's a little confusing. So I'll try to walk you through it.
Sure.
So he remembers being in his aunt's womb. He said the family lived in a house that had uncarpeted stairs and was near water. He has a twin brother now who is his younger brother. And I guess like when he was real young, he demanded his brother tell him why and how he had terminated the pregnancy and taken them out of their aunt's womb. Bobby said he tried to go back to his aunt, but found her womb was already occupied and was unable to dislodge its new occupant. He was eager to return to his aunt's life, right? So he went to his present mother instead. He described having watched his parents' wedding, which had taken place whilst his mother had been pregnant with him. He talked about having difficulties being born and finally being delivered by C-section. All of these events had transpired as Bobby described. During her incomplete pregnancy with twin boys, his aunt had lived in a house on a bay. The house had uncarpeted stairs. She had miscarried toward the end of the pregnancy, apparently when one twin had rolled over on the umbilical cord that they shared. Another pregnancy followed soon thereafter, and Bobby's cousin was born 18 months before him. Bobby's description of his parents' wedding was accurate, as was his account of having problems during birth.
I got nothing.
There's a lot to that one, too, that's like really disturbing. Like,
it's just, disturbing, sure. Just
confusing.
No, I was able to follow it.
Oh, I mean confusing in terms of the bigger questions in life.
I've already accepted that, man. I'm way beyond that being confusing at this point. It's just so interesting. I mean, look, if I saw a movie or read a book or something like a novel where someone was telling this story of these in-transit souls and that sort of thing, I'd be like, wow, that is really fascinating storytelling. Like, that is really cool. Like, I like that. How do you ever think of such a thing?
Right.
So then when it happens and they tell facts that are verifiable and no way of knowing them otherwise, what do you do?
Yeah, what are you left with, right?
What are you left with? It's like, well, okay, I guess there is something beyond death.
Right?
Period. I unless someone confronts me with something else, like I can't not think that anymore.
That's kind of where I'm at too. So, okay, let's try to kind of bring it all back together here. So, as we started this, we've come a long ways over the last couple of weeks, and go check out those shows. I think they're totally worth it. I think a lot of this stuff is crazy. And if it sounds like we're talking about this stuff somewhat normally now, it's only because we've been on a journey.
We got there.
Yes.
It was a journey, and we'd love for you to come along with us.
Seriously. But I found an anecdote that I thought was a nice way to kind of summarize maybe everything we've talked about here.
Yeah.
There was this boy named William, and he said that he died on a Thursday, gone to heaven, where he had seen animals and talked to God. He told God he was ready to come back and got born on a Tuesday. And he said, when you die, you don't go right to heaven. You go to different levels. Here, then here, then here. I guess he moved his hand up higher and higher and higher to indicate ascendance through the levels. He said that animals as well as people are reborn. It turns out William had been born on a Tuesday, and his grandfather, with whom he's identified, had died on a Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So, Tim, to sum it all up here, I guess when you die, you don't just go right to heaven. You kind of go here and then here and then here and then here and then maybe here. I don't know.
Maybe here and then maybe back. And then
yeah.
Maybe somewhere in between. What I love about these particular stories today is that it's more multicultural. It's more around the globe. And that was my biggest rub with the other stuff. And I understand, gathering the data, you have to get people to talk and you have to have researchers that listen, et cetera, et cetera. But this one, we got Thailand, we got India, we got Burma, we got Patrick, which I assume is some Western person, and Josh, and all over, all over the globe as far as I'm concerned. Quite honestly, and I would imagine if we were doing research in Africa and Australia and South America, we would get a lot of these stories too. That I find just endlessly fascinating. And of course, everything else that comes along with it. But it's what do you do with this information now, man?
Just got to live your best life, I guess.
I guess. Really. And another interesting thing, and I'm certain it's not in the book because you probably would have mentioned it, but I wonder what the faith situation in these families was. Were these children recounting these stories brought up in religious households?
Sure.
Whether that's Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or what have Hindu, I don't know.
Yep.
Based on some of the talk, it seems like there is some sort of religious overtones in some of these, but like you said at the outset, it's cross-cultural.
Exactly.
It's cross-denomination, cross-religious.
Right.
And again, that is just so endlessly fascinating.
And it also makes you wonder, too, if perhaps, we would have more stories if people are not afraid to talk about it because
exactly.
it cuts against their particular religion, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. It could be more common than we even know, but it's just maybe in some ways taboo for a lot of people.
And maybe someone, I would imagine there's a lot of kids potentially out there who said things and their parents are like, no. That doesn't, don't talk about that again, because that jives with my dogma, my upbringing, my religious learning. So we're just not going to do that and kind of sweep it under the rug, and then it's kind of lost for time, So Who knows? There's
potentially more out there.
Potentially a ton more out there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, wow.
So, Tim, after 4 or 5 episodes about all this crazy stuff, I think, we started with you being like a 0% on any and all this stuff, and now you're like 1,000,000%? That's what I'm hearing?
Kind of. I don't know if 1,000,000, you might be. It seems more likely than not based on this stuff. these are not stories pulled from some subreddit. These are not just ramblings of a who knows what saying God knows what. These are researchers. These are science-based, science-minded people that look for facts. These are people that don't publish things unless you can cross-check it as best as you can. And it's like, well, once that's done,
what's left?
I don't know. It's kind of weird stuff, man.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for coming along for the ride. Like we said at the outset, not to sound like a broken record, but if you do want to hear the other episodes along with this one, like this one, and a ton of other shows, head on over to www.patreon.com/Crackpot Podcast. I had to double check that. And sign up there. $3, $5, $7. Stay as long as you'd like. We'd love to have you. But man, thank you. It's been a journey. It's been a ride.
Indeed it has. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local small child that likes to tell interesting stories about our podcast. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.